Hello everybody, in this video you get to see me dig through boxes of junk parts and build a working wide ratio muncie 4-speed. I'm in here looking for a cluster gear for a muncie. Somebody made a exhaust cutout out of pieces of cast iron. Holy shit. Wide ratios. I feel like I'm about to fall through this floor. Alright, so I don't know what I'm going to do to get the rest off of them. Off the outside I'm not that worried about, but the inside where the bearings run are pretty rusty too. Alright everybody, so it may not look like it, but that gear's a lot cleaner than it was. I took it to a friend of mine's shop and he has a shop blast cabinet. All the teeth are good on that gear. The main problem I'm a little concerned about is down in here, called surface rust. A lot of surface rust, but I'm of the belief that low spots don't hurt anything. It's the high spots. So I want to clean the inside of that out. But right now, oh, and I'm also removing the anti-rattle, the backlash plate, whatever you want to call it, because I'm sure there's steel shot and it's rusted pretty thin in a couple places. I'm going to plug up this bench grinder with the wire brush here and clean up that gear. I'll show you what it looks like here in a second. Alright. I still have, I don't really have to, honestly. I could just leave the outside of it alone now. But I want to go back with a drill and a smaller wire brush and get the rest of the rust out of the teeth. But I've helped it a lot. And probably the hardest fucking part of this was getting those pins out of the gear that held the rattle plate on it, because one came out easy and the other two I had to drill because they were rusted in. But the next thing I want to focus on is taking a coat hanger or dowel pin or something and wrapping sanding paper, probably a 400, and taking this and going up and down it until that's 90%. Coat hanger, a piece of Scotch-Brite. Not removing a lot, but it is smooth. I might step up to a piece of 400 grit. Alright, so there's still slight pitting, but you don't feel any of that. And I believe that's as good as that gets. So next time I work on this, I'm going to have a couple of those small wire brushes that you put in a drill and finish getting all the rust out of the teeth. Alright. I've got it as clean as it's going to be. I'm up here looking for some transmission parts, and I had to stop and show you this Walmart ad. Walmart car care sale. Texaco motor oil, 84 cents. STP oil treatment, 96 cents. Starting fluid, $1.24. Brake fluid, $1.57. Fuel mix gum out tune-up treatment, $1.17. And a snow ice scraper, $1.46. So, also, it's almost January 21st, 2020. So, back in a second. Found a good bunch of good stuff here. There's at least 2 different transmissions worth of needle bearings in here. There's a 7/8 pin needle and a 1-inch pin needle. There was 1, 2, 3 wrenches. This snap ring pair of pliers. Hate bees. But all these little bearings goes in one of those cluster gears along with this pin. I hope that sleeve's the right kind. All kinds of spacer rings in here. Broken snap rings. Inside that can's broken gears and all kinds of fun stuff. The difference. One on the bottom is a 7/8 needle bearing, and that one's 1-inch. I don't understand why there's one row of big bearings. And everything else is small. You see any? I don't see any big ones. I'll go through these again when it's time that I'm taking these bearings and putting them in that gear. I'll go through them again before I do that and make sure there's at least enough to do it. I'll pick out the best ones and clean them. There might be 2 transmissions worth of bearings there. There really should be some extras, I guess. There's supposed to be 3 on each side. So 3 and 3. Yeah. There's extra stuff in here. Dad used to take these transmissions apart and just put them in a bucket. Put the bearings in there. He'd go through them and pick out the ones he needed. So I'll be back in a few after I've gotten those bearings cleaned up, and I may be using that case and that pin and gear and going ahead and putting the cluster gear in the case with it greased up. Alright, so I cleaned up the bearings as I went, took grease and packed the gear, then put the tube, roll needles, washer, roll needles, washer. That was a solid tube, so it didn't use the washer at the tube. I test fit the shaft. I've taken it out to look at it. I want to put it back in. Alright. Turns good. Alright, so I put the cluster gear in the case. Drove the pin in. I think that's lined up. If it ain't, I'll turn it. You want to see how you get a transmission main shaft apart without a press and it's rested solid? Reverse gear slide hammer. Didn't hurt it either. C-clip. Locked down rear bearing. Already was. First gear. First gear synchronizer. First gear slider. Honestly, this would already be off if that wasn't so rusted. Alright, so somebody pulled in the driveway and I went up the hill to help them with something a second. When I came back, I hit this on the ground one time and it came the rest of the way apart. The whole point that I took this apart for was to wire brush the shaft and the gears. Alright, so I got a main shaft apart. Reverse and speedometer gear, first gear sleeve, first gear, second gear, third gear, direct input. I've got a couple hubs to choose from, and one of these, the two clean ones were on that shaft. One of these was a late model and the other one was early. But it tells me that at one time Dad had put this gear, this main shaft together, but you know, it rusted so much and shit that I didn't want to use it. So I want to use the input pilot bearings or whatever out of this one and main bearing. And I got to find reverse in another transmission. So I didn't show putting the main shaft back together and putting the transmission 90% together, but I figured I could go ahead and show you what it looks like. You can see here I used a new input shaft bearing and a used nut that I found. I cleaned, even though it don't look like it or sound like it really, I cleaned all the gears up the best I could with a wire brush and some sandpaper. I set everything as good as I could with little knowledge of how this is supposed to be. But the 1 and 2 synchronizer assembly is a early synchronizer. It's got the thin rings. And 3 and 4 is late model. You know, the fat rings. I've done that because that's the only good hubs and sliders that I could find. I used the best synchronizers I could find. It's got new gaskets here and here. It's going to have a new gasket here and a new gasket for the bearing retainer. I don't have one, so I'm probably either going to get a used bearing retainer or buy a $17, $20 one on eBay. This transmission is well, it's like this. This transmission uses stud style shifter forks. So the shifter I have is for a later model with the bolt and hole. So I figure I can get a couple of those little black clips that adapt it. I can show you that reverse works. See how the sliders are turning backwards. The best I could do with the junk I had without buying new parts. I wanted to take a few minutes, since I didn't show putting that transmission together, and explain some things. I wanted to explain why I used the gears that I used and why I used the parts that I used. Doesn't matter because it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to explain it anyway. Everything in that case sitting on that workbench right now would have been considered junk. But when I looked at them, I seen something that could still be ran. But if I didn't do something, wasn't going to be considered that for much longer. That case and tail housing, aluminum stuff ain't going to rust away as long as it's not in corrosive stuff, for instance. But the steel gears and counter shaft and everything all had pitting, and it was just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse, and eventually it would just, might take 50 more years, but would have just been a red rock. This is that transmission's last chance to get used. And it was something that I've wanted to do for at least 10 years. Is put together something that is put together one using parts that were on their last leg, their last chance of greatness. That entire Chevelle is on its last chance of greatness, and that transmission's no different than that. It's just something I wanted to do. I watch a lot of muncie videos, and it seems like when somebody does something that somebody else considers wrong, they get all kinds of negative comments until eventually the person that has the channel turns off the comments. I don't really want to do that. This is why I'm explaining it. Nothing on that transmission or in it was good. It's not like I'm ruining anything. I'm making something work again that was scattered over 4 acres and was junk. Case has small issues that made it not worth a lot. Tail housing, same thing. Everything I used has something wrong with it. I deliberately chose that because I wanted it. I didn't want to feel bad if, let's say, the input blew up and it splits the case. Now, that rarely happens because there's all kinds of them up here that have battle scars from where a gear blew up, but they didn't split the case. But sometimes, they egg-shape the hole. The bearing can get wallered out in the case. Stuff happens to them. I didn't want to feel bad by ruining the good part. That's why I put this one together out of the worst usable stuff we had. I don't know if it will, but I hope that me explaining this maybe helps a little bit. Let me know what you think. And I do plan on putting one more together. However, it's going to be a total opposite of that. And we're going to see which one lasts longer. I'm going to put this one's together out of some of the worst stuff that's left. The second one is going to be put together out of the best stuff that's left. So, eventually we get to see which one lasts longer. The rig or the halfway by the book one. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more. And For this one, I'm saying you don't have to fit something right. You just have to make it work. And if it works for a while, it's better than it sitting and collecting rust. God bless.